Welcome to the Wayne Bennett podcast, celebrating West Virginia's people, places, and the culture of Southern Appalachia. Now here's your host, Wayne Bennett.
Welcome to the Easy Come, Easy Go broadcast. This is episode 4, and in the first episode we explained that this podcast is going to be about music, culture, sports, a little bit of everything. And as a former wrestling coach and referee and tournament director, I've been asked several times who was the best wrestler, in my opinion, that came from West Virginia as far as high school is concerned. And it's would be hard to pick a best because times are different, competition has changed. But truly, one of the best that I recall was a guy by the name of Ken Shurto. He went to Huntington High School, and he first time I ever saw him, he was helping referee a junior high state tournament in Huntington. I took a team down there, just of kind of an all-star team from Raleigh County, and Ken himself, I think, was just in the 9th grade, but he was helping do some refereeing, and his coach, Bill Archer, had told me that he was a pretty outstanding wrestler, but he didn't get to high school till the 10th grade, and that he was going to be a good one. And he said that most of the guys in the school, even though Ken was only about 112 pounds at that time, very few of the guys would mess with him because he was just said if you beat him up, you'd probably have to kill him, and he wouldn't quit. And so most people left him alone. Then it was later, the same year, we had a Hall of Fame wrestling tournament at Shady Spring High School, and it was one of the biggest tournaments in the state at that time. And the Southern Coalfield Officials Association, we put it on, and of course the officials worked for free, and the money we raised, we used that to sponsor the Raleigh County Wrestling Hall of Fame. Of course, the officials, some years we'd buy them a jacket. Of course, their wife and them would be able to attend the banquet of the Raleigh County Wrestling Hall of Fame, and so they did get some pay from it. But this tournament usually had 300 or 400 wrestlers in it, and had different age groups, which at that time was a little different. Well, Ken had caught a ride. He was 14 years old, and he caught a ride from Huntington with a friend who was going to wrestle, and when he came in to register, he, of course, entered the 13 and 14-year-old age group, and he asked if he could pay another entry fee and get in another age group. So said, sure. So he paid another entry fee, got in the 15 and 16-year-old age group, and then he asked if he could get into the 17 and 18-year-old age group. Now, this guy's 14 years old. Well, that's when I told him as a tournament director, I said, we'll let you in, but if they call your name in a match for 13 and 14 and you're wrestling somewhere on another match, 17 and 18, we're not going to hold the tournament up for you. You just have to forfeit one of them. And he said, well, he understood that. He just wanted to get a workout in. Well, tournament started, and he wrestled. He won the 13 and 14-year-old age group, and he won the 15 and 16-year-old age group. And we had some good wrestlers. I mean, we had state champions, and it was a quality tournament. And the interesting thing, in between matches, he jumped rope, and it's over in the corner, he was jumping rope all the time. And so by the end of the day, he'd won 2 age groups. He got in the finals of the 17 and 18-year-old age group. and he met a guy by the name of Troy Walton who had wrestled at Stonewall Jackson High School, and Troy had won the state championship that year in his weight class, and he beat Ken in a pretty close match, and even though Troy was 4 years older. Well, so we added it up. I think Ken wrestled 11 matches that day, jumped rope in between, and then that evening, his buddy who had given him a ride up there, he had lost out earlier and had left. So Ken didn't have a ride home. And now his parents didn't come with him, of course, but so he called around, he got a ride, and this is before they had cell phones or anything. He got a ride, and I think he got a ride to Charleston, then maybe I think his dad came and picked him up in Charleston. I'm not sure exactly what the details was, but he did get a ride home. But, amazingly, this guy had the drive and the ambition. 14 years old, he wanted to be good. And I think his dad was a doctor in Huntington. But anyway, Ken went on and he won 3 state championships in West Virginia. And I think he, 2 of the years that he won a state championship, I think he was voted the most outstanding wrestler in the AAA division of the states. And so he was good. And he also was a very good student. And he went on to Penn State and wrestled there. And at Penn State, he was a 3-time All-American. And he also, again, he had a very good grade point average. And in 1988, just 4 years after he graduated from high school, he was in the Olympics representing the United States, and he did quite well on international competition and stuff as well. Then after he left, graduated from Penn State, he coached several different places. Penn State, he coached, actually started a program at Queens College in North Carolina, but he's in his mid-50s now, and he has spent his whole life dedicated to wrestling, putting on camps and clinics and doing speeches and those kind of things. And so he would definitely be considered, he'd be on my list as one of the best I've ever seen in high school. Now, he did in '84, after he won the state championship, he got to be a part of the USA team that went to Pennsylvania and wrestled in a Pittsburgh Classic. In a Pittsburgh Classic, what they do, Pennsylvania is the hub, as far as I'm concerned, of high school wrestling. And the Pennsylvania All-Star team would wrestle an All-Star team from wrestlers made up all over the country, and usually beat them. And these guys would fly in from California and different places. And the Classic was kind of a whole weekend of wrestling. They would have some preliminary matches. They would have clinics. And we went up that year, me and a couple buddies, to watch Shurto, because I think it might have been the first time a West Virginia boy had been invited to come. And so it was a big deal. Went to a couple of clinics. One of them was by a coach named Gray Simon, who was at Tennessee at that time. And Gray had been an outstanding wrestler in his own right and did an excellent job in the clinic. Well, Ken, his competition was a guy from Pennsylvania, and his name was Matt Garrard, and he was no slouch himself. He finished his high school career with a 127-3 record. He was a 4-time state champion, which is really rare in Pennsylvania. And so he wasn't bad. And so when they wrestled, Gerard ended up winning. He beat Shurto 4-3 in a very exciting match, and it was really, really something to watch. And only time I've ever been to the Pittsburgh Classic, but since then there's been several West Virginia boys that have participated there and done well. And it was something. But Shurto again. Garrard went on to wrestle at the University of Pittsburgh, and his career wasn't quite as good. College career wasn't quite as good as Ken's. He wasn't quite as successful, but he wasn't a bad. He was 3-year letterman, and he placed in the Eastern Wrestling League quite a bit. But so Ken was definitely one of the best. Another guy that I really liked to watch was a guy from Parkersburg named Brandon Rader. And gosh, you go through Parkersburg's lineups of old and Parkersburg South, and I mean, you just see so many outstanding wrestlers. But one that actually really stood out in my mind was a guy by the name of Brandon Rader, and he was a 4-time state champion in West Virginia, and he went on to WVU, and when he got to WVU, he was the first person to ever get All-American status as a true freshman, and he was All-American that year. And he was actually ended up being a 2-time All-American. But when Brandon got in college, he got injured a lot, and he tore his knee out a couple of times, and he just didn't have it all. I would have thought if he was stayed healthy, he possibly could have been a 4-time All-American. But he was a very, very outstanding wrestler. But now people have asked me about some of the best, most exciting matches I've ever seen in West Virginia, and I can talk about some of the most anticipated matches, I guess. One was back around 1980. There was a guy named Greg Bradshaw that wrestled at Parkersburg, and it was 1981, I think. And Greg Bradshaw had won the state championship, 132-pound state championship in 1980. And he had finished second in 1979 as a runner-up. And, I mean, so he was, this was back when it was just a 3-year high school. It was not a 4-year high school. And Greg was an outstanding wrestler. And so in 1981, when he was a senior, he was in the same weight class as a guy from Barbersville named Rod Pruitt. And Rod Pruitt had won the state championship the year before, 1980, at 138, and finished with a record of 31-0. And so Bradshaw won in 80 at 132. Rod Pruitt won in 80 at 138. Rod Pruitt was the son of Bob Pruitt, the football coach at Marshall University. And Rod had picked up a lot of his early wrestling when they were in Virginia and a couple other places. And one of his assets was he was really a strong wrestler on the bottom. He did a lot of different roles and a lot of different moves that confused people. Not so many stand-ups, but did a lot of what they call Granby rolls and side rolls, things like that. And he would end up putting people on their back, and a lot of times that's how he won. And he was a good overall wrestler, but that was one of his strongest suits. And so in 1981, with Bradshaw was 31-0, or he was undefeated at the time. He was probably 29-0, and Rod Pruitt was undefeated, and they were in the same weight class. Now, the way the brackets were drawn up that year, they were going to meet in the semifinals, which that happens occasionally in the state since they do not seed wrestlers. So sometimes your best matches are in the semifinals, or some of your best wrestlers will meet there. People have complained about that, but it's hard to seed wrestlers, especially when they come from different parts of the state, Eastern Panhandle, Northern Panhandle, and Southern part of the state, and they don't wrestle common opponents or they don't wrestle each other. So I think the system they got right now is one of the better ones. There may be a better one out there, but so they were scheduled to meet. So that was in Huntington at the state tournament. That was the big deal. Who's going to win, Pruitt or Bradshaw? Pruitt or Bradshaw? And so, it was packed on Friday night of the state tournament, and it was a lot of intensity in the air. Both wrestlers came out, and they circled a little bit. Bradshaw shot, and he got the takedown. But immediately after he got the takedown, you saw what his strategy was going to be, and it was going to be, I'm not going to wrestle you on the mat. I'm going to take you down and let you up. And it worked. He took Pruitt down several times. When Pruitt started down in one of the periods, Bradshaw turned him loose immediately. And it ended up being a very frustrating night for Rod Pruitt because he didn't get to do what he did best. And so he ended up getting beat. I think the score was like 14-4. It was extremely frustrating for Pruitt. Bradshaw ended up the season with a 31-0 record, and Rod Pruitt ended up with the 31-1. That was the only match he had lost in 2 years. So that was a pretty exciting and anticipated match. It didn't turn out as close as everybody thought it was going to be, but it was something to watch. And while I'm thinking, I guess it was around 1990, Ken Shurto's brother, Todd, he had won the state championship the year before, and 130 pounds, and he was pretty accomplished wrestler. And so when he was a senior in 1990, he was undefeated, and there was a guy had moved into the Beckley area. His name John Young. He was a tall black kid, and he was truthfully, I don't even know where he came from, but he was really good. And he went through the whole Beckley season undefeated, got in the state tournament in a different bracket than what Shurto was in, and ended up, they got to meet in the finals. Well, nobody had really heard of John Young too much, but he did at the time when he was facing Shurto. He was 37-0, and he and Shurto had an excellent match at 135. Ended up, it was extremely close, 9-8. Of course, a lot of Beckley people thought that Shurto might have stalled a little bit there at the end and was getting some home cooking, but that's Beckley. Those were Beckley fans. But that was an exciting match, and then after graduation, Young left, and I don't know where he went to. Haven't been able to track him down since then. Don't know whether he went on to college, and I think Todd Shurto might have went to Ohio State. But it was an extremely good match in the finals. And we one other match that I recall that wasn't even in the state tournament. It was over at Independence High School, and went over there. They used to, Independence, Wirt County, and Williamstown, which were the three of the top 5 AA schools in the state at that time. They had a little triangular deal. They would wrestle 1 year at Williamstown, those 3 teams, and then the next year they would go to Independence, and the next year they'd go to Wirt. And they did that for a little while. It was good competition. And anyway, the one of the days that they were at Independence, I went over to watch, because there's some pretty good, some of the top wrestlers in the state were going to be participating in this competition. Wirt County had a boy by the name of Billy Kidder, Kidder, and he was pretty tough kid, and when he was a 103-pounder back in 1993, he finished second in the state, and but then I didn't hear about him for a couple of years, and I don't know that whether he moved out of state or what, but I hadn't heard about him until 1996. Well, Independence had a boy by the name of Jeremy Hart, and some people call him Jughead. Well, he had, in 94, he finished third in the state. In 95, he was state champion at 125 pounds, and he had I think a 39-2 record that particular year. And I had the opportunity to coach against Jeremy Hart when he was in junior high and stuff, and never could figure out a way to beat him. So we usually, that was one weight class we never counted on even making it close. Usually kind of put that down to 6. And but he was an outstanding wrestler all the way through his career. And then in 1996, over at Independence High School, Kidder was undefeated at the time, and Hart was undefeated at the time, having an outstanding career. And those guys got to wrestle each other. And I'm telling you what, it was two of the quickest guys I've seen in high school. I mean, those guys, if you shot, a lot of times you just picked up air, and that was all you got because they were so quick. And they had, it was kind of exciting. The gym was full. They had the big floodlight from the top on, and the rest of the gym was dark. And it was really exciting. Then Hart won that match, and then they got to meet each other again in the state finals, and Hart won that match pretty handily. I mean, there was a lot of scoring. They were both so quick. I think Hart won 13-8, and he finished his career with a 12th grader as a 40-0 state champ, and Kidder ended the season 29-2, and both losses he had was to Jeremy Hart. And that particular year, Jeremy Hart was named the Dutton Award winner in West Virginia, which the Dutton Award winner you're considered the best wrestler in West Virginia, regardless of what class you're in, either AAA, AA, or whatever. And Hart was the first Raleigh County to ever win it. And he went on and wrestled at Appalachian State University, and very successful. He ended up being the captain of the team his senior year and qualified for the NCAA tournament. Unfortunately, his last year he was banged up, and even though he had qualified for the NCAAs, he didn't make much noise there because he had been injured most of the year. But he had and at the time of this talk, he's currently the head coach at Independence High School, so he's come back to give back, and he's done some excellent jobs in some of our clinics and some of the camps around. And but that was an exciting non-state tournament match. Another Raleigh County boy, and this was one that I really enjoyed watching. Was Nick Hilton from Liberty High School, and when Nick was in 2005 as a freshman, of course he'd had an outstanding middle school career, but he finished 6th in the state as a freshman, and the guy that I want to kind of focus on from Berkeley Springs, a guy named Cody Reed, he was also a freshman. He ended up winning 43 matches that particular year in the same weight class, 160. Then in 2006, Cody Reed was wrestling 171 pounds, and he ended up second in the state with a 43-8 record. And Nick Hilton was a sophomore. He stayed in the 160-pound class, and he finished sixth in the state again. But he had a 46-4 record, so he lost two times in the states. People started hearing about these guys then, and in 2007, Nick won the state championship in the 171-pound class, double A, and he finished that year with a 46-0 record. And most of the matches that he won by pin, and so he was getting a lot of attention at that time. But in the meantime, also Cody Reed, he was wrestling in the 189-pound class, and he ended up the season with the 52-2 record. I think he lost to two people out of state, and he was the champion in that particular weight class. And they didn't get to wrestle each other in the regular season, so and because they were in different weight classes. So when the senior year came along, of course, they both continued their ways, and they both ended up in the same weight class. Cody Reed stayed 189. Hilton had moved up some weight, and he was wrestling 189 also. And they both entered the state tournament undefeated. When they met in the finals, it was the intensity. You could just cut it with a knife. It was really something else, and one of the most exciting matches that I've seen in the States. And it did not disappoint the fans, except for maybe Berkeley Springs, because Nick ended up winning the match, and he won 5-3, takedown late, and Cody Reed, it was the only match that he had lost all year. And so he ended up with a 39-1 record. And Nick ended up 46-0 again, hadn't been beaten in 2 years. Nick went on to the Naval Academy and wrestled up there 1 year, then ended up at WVU. And so it was, he's presently the coach at Liberty High School, and does a great job down there. Now, there are others out there, but those are the ones that just kind of come to mind that kind of caught my attention and what I liked about them. As far as exciting matches in team matches, I used to love to watch Woodrow Wilson and Shady Springs when both of them had competitive teams and they would wrestle each other, especially around 81, 82. When Mike Tyree was coach, around that time, 80, 81. And at Woodrow Wilson, Dix Manning was at Shady and Meddy. When those two got together, it was packed house, and there was no love lost between those two schools. And they were something to watch. And especially Jeff Sweeney and Carl Cousins, when they got together at 167, man, it wasn't the most finesse type wrestling, but it was aggressive and mean, and the fans loved it. And another exciting match I remember was in a YMCA youth match and wrestling a league championship, and Central Beckley was wrestling Crab Orchard, and the teams were so evenly matched. It was unbelievable. And it came, Mike Tyree was referee and Rodney Elam, and it was packed house, standing room only. And I mean, every match was, the fans were on their feet, and it came down to who outpointed another, who may have had one pin more or whatever, but it was really, really something to watch, and it was that close. And it's kind of hard to believe that a youth match would be all the matches I've seen, but those are just a few that have come to my mind. And I enjoy talking about the wrestling and could talk about them all day, but there's a few things I want to share. And I appreciate you listening, and we'll talk some more about wrestling and other sports in future podcasts. But remember, if you got any suggestions or you want to be on our program, email me at awbennett50@gmail.com, awbennett50@gmail.com. And we'll get back with you and see what's going on, and might get you on here. And until next time, remember, if you ain't dead yet, you ain't done yet.